One more victim of yesterday's Quarry Bay Park shooting dies. Donald Trump signals shift from imposing China investment limits. And the U.S. Supreme Court upholds Trump's travel ban.
Good evening. The death toll from yesterday's Quarry Bay Park shooting has gone up to 2. A 62-year-old man died this afternoon, and 2 other people injured in the incident remain hospitalized. Police have detained a female suspect and classified the case as murder and attempted murder. As Elmi Lung reports, investigators are trying to figure out how the attacker got a hold of a weapon used in the shooting.
More guns, albeit fake ones, were found at the suspect's Chung Kwan O home last night, shortly after the 44-year-old woman was taken back to the police station for further questioning in this murder and attempted murder case. Police are still trying to trace the origin of the gun used in yesterday's fatal shooting at Quarry Bay Park. Sources say the suspect, a self-claimed bodyguard, has refused to talk about this. Secretary for Security John Lee said it's a case of illegal possession of firearms.
I've also asked the police to look at the smuggling of the firearm into Hong Kong and see where there are things where we need to follow up. I must emphasize that in regard to control of firearms in Hong Kong, the laws are strict. Anybody who wants to possess a gun, he must get the approval of the Commissioner of Police and a license in which the condition, including the use and storage of the firearm, is very clearly specified.
One lawmaker thinks more can be done.
Periodically, touch wood, we will discover certain people who, against the law, import large amount of weapons. Even to the extent of an armory, a big armory. So we must carefully evaluate our system to see whether we can put in meaningful resources in order to have the maximized possibility of prevention.
Yesterday's shooting left an 80-year-old woman and a 62-year-old man dead. The 2 siblings were wounded. The suspect is a niece of the victims. Elmi Long, TVB News.
Legislators are discussing whether to set up a panel to look into the MTR Corporation's alleged cover-up of substandard construction works at Hong Kong Station. Lawmaker Cheng Chung Tai moved the motion under Legislative Council Powers and Privileges Ordinance. If his peers agree, a select committee will be set up. It will have the power to summon parties to testify and provide further information on works at the Sha Tin to Central Link. That's after steel bars supporting a new platform level at the Hong Kong Station were said to have been cut short. The transport chief is not in favor of removing part of the concrete at the platform level for sample checks.
The suggestion to demolish, the concrete for the sake of examining whether or not they are substandard work is a way that without any, scientific, justification, I would say. And if there are further evidence pointing to the likelihood of such a substandard work, then it might warrant another thought.
A 75-year-old terminal patient at Tuen Mun Hospital died after a care assistant allegedly inserted a hard object up his bottom during a shower. While the case is still under investigation, the victim's family is upset about the hospital's failure to explain what actually happened. Sharon Tang tells us more.
It's like going from heaven to hell. That's how Mr. Wong described his feelings today when his father should have been discharged from hospital. Last Saturday, the patient told his sons that something of the length of a palm was shoved into his anus 5 to 6 times, causing him pain. That was during his morning shower with the help of 2 patient care assistants. One of the sons today said the hospital called him that day, saying the 75-year-old man was suffering from rectal bleeding from a hard stool. The sons went to the hospital where staff members allegedly stopped them from calling the police. A wound was later found in the patient's rectum, but his condition continued to worsen and he died on Monday. The hospital yesterday indicated the patient had refused their suggestion of an urgent operation on his rectum, but his son argued that's because the doctor told his father if he underwent surgery, he would face a mortality rate of over 50%. In a statement today, the hospital admitted to having undesirable communication with the patient's family, but would not comment further due to an ongoing investigation. Sources say officers do not have adequate evidence yet to prove the victim's wound was caused by a hard object. More may come to light once forensic pathologists conclude their examinations. A patient group's representative thinks it will be more than a medical incident if the allegations are true.
This is probably an isolated incident. They have to check whether there is some inappropriate action done by any medical staff and see whether they are suitable to continue their work.
Sharon Tang, TVB News.
Elsewhere, President Xi Jinping met with U.S. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis in Beijing today. The meeting comes as the world waits for indications that North Korea is taking steps to dismantle its nuclear arsenal. China is considered a key influencer of Pyongyang. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un was in Beijing for a two-day visit last week. The meeting with Mattis also comes with a backdrop of spiraling tensions between China and the U.S. over a possible trade war. Mattis has also been highly critical of Beijing's military moves in the South China Sea. Mattis is the first Pentagon chief to visit China since 2014. Well, U.S. President Donald Trump has suggested his administration may not announce plans to impose limits on Chinese investment in American technology companies. Instead, he may urge Congress to finalize a law that allows the government to review foreign investment for national security concerns. Alan Booknear reports.
Donald Trump pushed back on recent reports that the U.S. was preparing restrictions, saying the administration could review foreign investment under the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. He also defended his tariffs on steel and aluminum and the looming tariffs on Chinese products.
Other countries are negotiating, and without tariffs, you could never do that. And if they don't want to negotiate, then we'll do the tariffs. And just remember, we're the bank. We're the bank that everybody wants to steal from and plunder. And it can't be that way anymore.
Trump also lashed out at Harley-Davidson and its announcement that it will move some motorcycle production overseas to avoid paying new tariffs imposed by the European Union. He noted that the company had previously announced plans to move some production to Thailand before the EU tariffs were introduced.
Harley-Davidson is using that as an excuse. And I don't like that because I've been very good to Harley-Davidson, and they used it as an excuse.
But with trade wars looming between the U.S. and EU and the U.S. and China, some warn of dire consequences.
There's a tariff placed on steel. It might boost jobs within the steel industry, but all of the other industries that use steel as an input are going to lose out and potentially have to scale back their employment.
Challenger says an all-out trade war could cost the U.S. 400,000 jobs.
We know from history that trade wars can roll and end up affecting a huge number of industries across the board. That could trigger a potential recession and really affect all companies. So it's a particularly dangerous time.
Alan Booknear, TVB News.
President Donald Trump is celebrating a major victory after the U.S. Supreme Court upheld his controversial travel ban. But critics are calling the decision shameful and vow to fight it. In a 5-4 ruling, Supreme Court justices ended a fierce battle in the courts that argued banning people from Iran, Libya, Somalia, Syria, and Yemen from entering America amounted to a ban against Muslims. The justices ruled those challenging the ban failed to prove it either violated U.S. immigration laws or is unconstitutional religious discrimination.
The ruling shows that all of the attacks from the media and the Democrat politicians are wrong, and they turned out to be very wrong. We have to be safe and we have to be secure. At a minimum, we have to make sure that we vet people coming into the country.
Ban, no wall, no ban, no wall.
On the steps of the Supreme Court, travel ban opponents express outrage.
The court has given a green light to the President of the United States to discriminate against a group of people based on their faith.
And I never thought I would stand on the steps of the Supreme Court and hear the most fundamental pillar of our Constitution, freedom of religion, challenged.
Similar protests were staged in New York and outside City Hall in San Francisco.
We will fight at the ballot box. We will hold Congress accountable and demand that they pass legislation to end this racist ban.
Of the 4 liberal justices who didn't agree with the ban, one was vocal.
Justice Sonia Sotomayor read a summary of her dissent from the bench, an impassioned dissent, in which she said that today's decision was a mistake of historic proportions. She likened it to a very unpopular Supreme Court decision during World War II that allowed for the internment of Japanese Americans.
The travel ban has been in place since December, when the justices prevented lower court rulings from blocking it. The Trump administration is being sued for separating migrant children at the U.S. border with Mexico. A total of 17 states and the District of Columbia argue separating children from their parents is unconstitutional. The family separations began with the administration's zero-tolerance policy on those caught crossing the border illegally. This comes even though Trump signed an executive order last week to end family separations. And still ahead in our newscast, findings of a Consumer Council study on educational advisory services. A preview of the government's annuity scheme. And Prince William visits the Holocaust Museum in Israel.
有蚊使乜怕？殺他死液體滅蚊器，採用日本配方，對人體無害，有效殺滅惡蚊。電線夠晒長，放到邊殺到邊，全靠殺他死，蚊蟲冇定期。
Welcome back to TVB News. Are students getting their money's worth for services when they seek advice on studying overseas? Not necessarily, according to the Consumer Council, which is warning of a lack of impartiality and transparency in education advisory services. Kainan Chu reports.
The Consumer Council today presented its findings after a 9-month study which includes visiting education expos and holding focus group meetings. In some cases, consultants are in fact agents remunerated for recruiting students. Mystery shoppers also exposed floating charges.
There was a pretended mainland students asking for the service, and she was initially offered a service of $12,000, but when she appeared at the company, the manager actually says that it would cost her $20,000 instead.
Another student who expressed a desire to study in the United States was persuaded to go to Canada instead.
Because of this lack of impartiality issue, therefore the information that they got from the agencies were, so to speak, incorrect, misleading. Whether you are being cheated, there's no way that you can do anything about it at all, because there's no contract. There should be some form of contract in these sort of transactions.
In addition, the watchdog has also recommended that the government develop guidelines on promotional materials to enhance student protection. Kainan Chu, TVB News.
The government is set to release its own annuity scheme next month. With that and a number of other private ones on offer, how should the public choose the best one for them? Winna Wong takes a look.
The government's very own annuity scheme is the authorities' latest measure to help an ever-aging population. Under the plan, permanent residents 65 years old or above will be able to invest a lump sum in exchange for guaranteed monthly income for the rest of their lives. Take note, though, participants of the scheme will not be able to get the lump sum back. The maximum investment is $1 million in exchange for $5,800 a month for men and $5,300 for women. Women get less because they tend to live longer than men. The minimum investment is $50,000, but the payout, in turn, would only be a few $100s a month. So, does the public think this is a good idea? Of course not, says this man. I'm over 70 years old. I doubt I'll live long enough for that to become a good deal. I don't have that much money anyway, even if it's just $50,000, says this local resident. But if you do have the money and the time, a maximum investment will take 15 years to make a full return. And if a participant of the annuity scheme dies before receiving 105% of the premium, his or her beneficiaries will get the rest of the sum in monthly installments until 105% is received. Meanwhile, there are already similar products being offered by private companies. Many private products entail regular contributions earlier in life for as many as 30 years. If it is a lump sum product, the premium is usually no less than $1 million, and the monthly payback is also less than what the government is offering. Insurance sector lawmaker Chan Kin-por says at a glance, the government annuity scheme seems more attractive, but reminds the public an increase in interest rates could make private annuities more worthwhile. Winna Wong, TVB News.
Britain's Prince William continued his tour of the Middle East with stops in Israel. The prince had an emotional visit at a Holocaust museum and took in a football game with Arab and Jewish youth. Prince William is the first member of the British royal family to pay an official visit to Israel. Though the high-profile trip is being billed as non-political, William is meeting with Israeli and Palestinian leaders. At an official reception that included Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, William spoke about his earlier visit to the Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial Center.
It was a profoundly moving experience. It brought back powerful memories of the visit that my wife, Catherine, and I made last year to Stutthof concentration camp.
William also met with descendants of Holocaust survivors who were saved by Princess Alice, William's great-grandmother. The prince also called for reconciliation between the people of the Middle East.
This region has a complicated and tragic history. In the past century, the people of the Middle East have suffered great sadness and loss. Never has hope and reconciliation been more needed.
The prince also visited coastal Tel Aviv to attend a football match of young Jewish and Arab players run by the Perez Peace Center. William will have to continue his footwork around politics as he heads to the Palestinian territories. The Israeli president asked him to take a message of peace to Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas.
We have to find together the way to build confidence. To build confidence as a first step to bring to understanding that we have to bring to an end the tragedy between us that goes along for more than 120 years.
Previous British policy has avoided official royal visits to the region until the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is solved. 3 decades of British rule between the 2 world wars helped establish some of the fault lines of today's Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
And that is our news.
Bye for now.